You ever meet someone so terrible that calling them a bad person almost feels like an insult to bad people? Because my landlord didn't just make life difficult. He turned my home into a battlefield. For 3 years, I stayed quiet, paid rent on time, followed every rule. And he mistook my patience for weakness. What he didn't realize was this: the quieter someone suffers, the louder justice sounds when it finally arrives. If you've ever dealt with someone who abused their power, someone who thought they could push you around without consequences, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because today's story proves one thing. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives wearing a government badge.
When I first moved into the apartment, I wasn't expecting luxury. I just wanted stability. A quiet place, fair rent, a landlord who respected boundaries. Simple things. The building itself wasn't great. Peeling paint, old wiring, strange plumbing noises at night. But I told myself it was temporary, a stepping stone. And for the first few months, things were tolerable. Then I met the real version of my landlord. He had this way of talking down to people, smiling without warmth. Every conversation felt less like communication and more like a warning. At first, it was small things. Items started disappearing from the shared laundry area. My dryer? Gone. Household supplies? Missing. When I asked about it, he shrugged. Common area, he said casually. Things happen. That was the first moment I realized something was wrong.
Over time, the problems multiplied. The plumbing failed one winter. Water backed up everywhere. I reported it immediately. Days later, he handed me the bill. A repair invoice? Addressed to me. I remember staring at it, confused. This isn't my responsibility, I told him. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Well, he said, you live there. Turns out the damage was normal wear and tear, legally his responsibility. But arguing with him felt like arguing with a wall that charged rent. I paid it anyway, because sometimes survival feels more important than being right. That payment made me late on rent the next month. The only time in 3 years I wasn't perfectly on time. And he never let me forget it. That's when the intimidation started. He sent me an official-looking letter about a parking space dispute. Threatening language, legal tone. So I did something he didn't expect. I contacted a lawyer. The moment he learned that, everything changed. Suddenly, he tried raising my rent by $150 a month. Retaliation. Pure and simple. He began showing up unannounced, knocking aggressively. Once, I heard someone trying my door handle late at night. The sound of metal rattling still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. My home no longer felt safe. And yet, I stayed calm. Paid rent, documented everything, waited. Because deep down, I knew people like him eventually overplay their hand.
The longer I lived there, the more problems revealed themselves. The porch outside my apartment was dangerous. Boards loose, railings unstable. Years passed without repair. Chunks of ceiling paint fell randomly onto the floor. The gas heater, barely functional. One day, while talking with a neighbor, I learned something shocking. The plumbing system wasn't even legal. No permits, no inspections, nothing. That's when the realization hit me. He wasn't just greedy. He was cutting corners that could seriously hurt someone. And still, I kept quiet. Until he crossed the final line. After 3 years of perfect tenancy, he demanded a $500 rent increase. $500! For an apartment falling apart! I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the notice. Not angry, not shocked, just done.
That was the moment something shifted inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't trying to survive his behavior. I was leaving. And suddenly, I had nothing to lose. 4 days before moving out, I made a phone call. One calm, polite phone call to the city building inspector. I told him everything. The illegal plumbing, the unsafe porch replacement done without permits, the heater violations, the structural issues, every detail I had silently endured for years. The inspector listened carefully. Then he said, "We'll take a look." The very next day, I watched from my window as a city vehicle pulled up. Clipboard, measuring tape, camera. He examined everything. Measured railings, checked connections, took photos. And here's the important part. Each violation carried a $500 per day fine until fixed. I didn't know exactly what happened afterward, but I knew one thing. For the first time in 3 years, I felt powerful. A week before my move-out date, he tried one last intimidation tactic. He told me I had to leave at a specific hour. That wasn't legally required where I lived, so I didn't respond. He escalated immediately, threatened police involvement. Big mistake, because instead of arguing, I went to the police station myself that morning. I calmly explained the situation, documented the harassment. So when he showed up later, angry, loud, demanding I leave, I simply called the police. Officers arrived, listened, and then told him something he clearly wasn't used to hearing. "I'm sorry, sir, but the tenant is in the right." Watching his confidence crack was unforgettable, but he still wasn't finished. Later that day, I left briefly to move items into storage. When I returned, my heart dropped. My apartment door was nailed shut. Nailed shut! For a moment, I just stood there, stunned, keys still in my hand. He had broken into my apartment while I was gone. I called the police immediately. This time, I didn't ask politely. I requested a supervisor. I was done being patient. Officers arrived, examined the damage, and began taking statements. And guess what? The landlord disappeared before the supervisor showed up. Almost like he knew exactly how serious his mistake was. Because breaking into a tenant's home isn't harassment anymore. It's a felony. I obtained the police report shortly after. Charges were filed for breaking and entering. Felony charges. On top of city inspections, on top of daily fines, on top of being officially placed on the town's radar. The man who spent years squeezing money out of tenants was suddenly facing consequences he couldn't bully his way out of. Me? I didn't celebrate loudly. There was no dramatic confrontation. Just quiet relief. The kind you feel when a weight you didn't realize you were carrying finally lifts. For the first time in years, I felt safe. He thought intimidation would keep tenants silent. He thought fear meant control. But the moment accountability entered the picture, everything changed. Fines piling up, legal charges pending, authorities watching closely. All because he pushed one good tenant too far. Sometimes revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply letting the truth speak and letting the system do its job. Here's the lesson. Kindness isn't weakness. Patience isn't surrender. And treating good people badly always comes with a cost, even if that bill takes years to arrive. Because eventually, karma collects rent. If this story gave you that satisfying feeling of justice finally being served, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the worst landlord or boss you've ever dealt with? And remember, the The quiet ones you underestimate? They're often the ones writing the final chapter. See you in the next story.